Tell me why everything turned around. Packing up, shacking up, so you wanna do. If I could, maybe I'd give you my world. Open up, everything's waiting for you. You can go your own way. Go your own way. You can call it another lonely day. You can go your own way. Go your own way.
Welcome everyone for session 3 of our Culture Partners series with Vince Martinez from Culture Partners. We've been through session 1, closing the mindset gap. Session 2 last week, overcoming the bias to inclusion. And today, session 3, how did that happen? And tomorrow, our last and fourth session in this series, best practices in achieving desired results. We are so glad you are here. We want to send out thank yous to our respective county offices, El Dorado County Office and Riverside County Office. I'm Kevin Schaefer, Director of Inclusive Practices for the Supporting Inclusive Practices, and along with our Executive Director, Kristen Brooks, and our entire team, we welcome you to this series that has been, I must say, Vince, one of our most highly anticipated and most positive responses from the participants that we've had. So we appreciate you facilitating as well as participating in our inclusion conference back in May. So we are going to go ahead and get started. I know you have a lot of information, and welcome.
Thank you so much, Kevin. I was inspired by your music there, so I noticed that, you know, great songs, great music will do that a little bit. So it's good to be with all of you. Thank you for those who have come back. I don't know if we have anyone new with us today. If you're new to us and you've not been in this series at all, feel free on the chat panel just to chime in and let us know that this is the first time you've been through one of these sessions. I see a lot of familiar names showing up here on the participant panel as well. But whether you're new to us or whether this is the the first session you've been, or you've been with all of us for these various sessions, we're thrilled to have you back. Now, today's topic, and I'm going to try to get to it as quickly as possible, is this concept of how did that happen? Now, interestingly enough, group, I was just telling Kevin as we had logged on that we've all had those days where you kind of get partway through the day or partway through the morning and something happens and your instant response is, how is that possible? How did that just happen? Now, I don't know about all of you, but and I'd love to hear from some of you on the chat panel. Anybody have a how did that happen moment this week? If so, just throw it in the chat panel. A sentence or two on what your how did that happen moment was would be great. I love these two photos here, technically 3 photos, I guess. Because it does make you scratch your head a little bit about some of these. I'm glad that is not my local mall there in the middle of the photo or something, with the sharks swimming around at the bottom of the escalator. Yeah, Jenny, how did transportation not know? they had to provide transport. Yeah. Valerie, I'm sorry. You're breaking my heart already on this by seeing these on the chat panel. Overbooked 2 meetings on top of each other. The facepalm moment, as Kevin, you said there. Juan, this idea of the school year came sooner, the end of the school year came sooner than I had expected. We've all had that moment, right? Where we find ourselves thinking, what, wow, what just happened? How did I miss this? Cynthia, boy, perhaps you should get together with Valerie, Cynthia. The car insurance doubled. Someone else's accident was put on your policy. Well, that's always fun. Great comments here. I love this team. And many years, a number of years ago, our firm, Culture Partners, wrote a book. You can see it there on the right-hand side of the screen. And the title of that book was called How Did That Happen? Now, in the spirit of full transparency, team, when we initially wrote that book, the title of the book was supposed to be How Did I Let That Happen? How did I let that happen? And we approached the publishers and we said, we want to write this book. It would be our 3rd book in this case. And so the publishers knew us well. They knew it was going to be around this idea of culture, accountability, those sorts of things. And they said, you know what? No one's going to buy a book called How Did I Let That Happen? And so no one's going to even want to read a book called How Did I Let That Happen? So you need to change the name of the book, and the book needs to be called How Did That Happen? Well, that book goes on to be a bestseller group, and it, has had a wild success. But the interesting thing about that title is, if you think about every version of these How Did That Happen moments, the question is there a version of a How Did I Let That Happen that's in here? Now, some of these, as you see, my car insurance doubling because somebody else's accident is added to my policy. You could see where one day we'd wake up and go, how in the world did that happen? Some of them, the school year sneaking up on us, maybe are a version of How Did I Let That Happen? Now, group, we've spent some time in the last couple of sessions talking about some of the biggest impediments to change. You may remember these 3 that we've talked about in prior sessions. Ultimately, when it comes around to this idea of how did that happen, or how did I let that happen, we're going to be building off of some of these biggest impediments to change, and how you as a leader can ensure the fact that with whatever it is you're looking to accomplish, that people will show up taking accountability to deliver on it. And you're not going to find yourself scratching your head saying, hey, how did that happen? How did that general ed teacher not understand X? Or how did that administrator not realize Y? And so as we go through today, I am going to spend some time talking to you about some of the common misses when it comes to getting people to show up delivering on what you need them to. And when we talk about it relative to this idea of inclusion, each of you right now, in many instances, is in a position of influence, but perhaps with very limited authority to get people to show up delivering on the things you need them to. So it would make sense that if we can equip you with some skills in your toolbox to be able to more effectively create these conditions so people show up delivering on those results that we need them to achieve, that it's going to help you be successful. Is that fair here, team, on this? So let me start this with you with a very simple question. And if you would, in the chat panel for us, group, just answer this simple question. What is the difference between having an expectation and establishing an expectation? What is the difference? And I'll wait for those. Who knows? I love that. Communication. Only you know you're having it. When you establish it, you shared this expectation with others, a discussion among team members, communication, accountability, commitment, action, and our SIP team, maybe Debbie, I see you on here. Would you, Debbie, if you're willing to come off of mute and just kind of play along with me for a minute, would you just give us a thumbs up or just a little heads up or something, a little smiley face or something that would let us know you're willing? All right, Debbie's hand is up. So group, if we could maybe pull Debbie off of mute for just a minute.
I think I'm off.
Perfect, Debbie. So thanks so much for being voluntold again and being so willing. I appreciate that. You go into a restaurant. Do you have an expectation or do you establish your expectation for the server?
I have an expectation.
Yeah, and do you hold that server accountable for that expectation you have, Debbie?
Sometimes.
Yeah, so how do you hold them accountable to it?
I might speak an opinion if something isn't quite right or provide a little feedback.
Yeah, I love this. And by the way, at the end of the meal, when it comes time to pay the bill, there is an expectation that you're clearly establishing whether or not they've met your expectation. Is that fair by the tip or whatever you provide them? Is that fair, Debbie?
Yeah, I'm pretty standard on the 20%, but like if they really irk me, then they may get 15 or 18.
Okay. So Debbie, boy, I wish when I was working in the restaurant industry, you were my customer, right? Because not everyone is as generous as Debbie is here in outlining this. So Debbie, let's just set up a hypothetical. Let's say you go to a restaurant and you are there, and perhaps you're there with Heather from our meeting here today, and you just want some quiet time to maybe have a deep conversation with Heather. Yeah, maybe about employees, about students, about whatever that is. And yet, when you get into that restaurant, Debbie, you sit down at the table, your server comes over, they're chatting with you for a while. They come back a few minutes later and fill up your glass of water. They're talking with you more. They come back multiple times to see if you guys are ready to order. They're constantly there providing a great service. Now, Debbie, that's what you would expect, right?
Right.
Yeah. And when does this become a problem, Debbie? Because you want to have a little bit of time to not be interrupted as you're having this conversation with Debbie. Do you see where that?
Oh yeah, I'm getting irritated.
Yeah,
but
you are getting irritated. So then the server who's providing incredible service to you decides they're going to have the manager come over and check with you to see how your experience is. And Debbie, you said you give a little bit of feedback. What feedback would you give to that manager when they came over and said, "Oh, how's it going here today?"
I'd probably say this server is being wonderful and being very attentive to our needs. However, I'm trying to like have a meeting and, we're good. We'll call you if we need you.
So group, here's the aha moment. And Debbie, this is so perfect because in that moment, you're starting to establish the expectation because to your point, you were annoyed, right?
Well, I needed to get something done.
You had an expectation when you came in, right?
Right.
That would suggest that I just want some time here. Yet when do we generally establish that expectation? We establish that expectation when things start to go off the rails a little bit. Mm-hmm. When our expectation is not being met, that tends to be when we push back a little bit or provide some feedback on it. Right? Elizabeth, I love this. I love this statement. Expectation is something you expect. Establishing is something you learn to expect, right? Shared vision, Lydia says. Having an expectation is personal. Establishing it is shareable. Now, Debbie, let's just go one step further on this. And you're so gracious here with your time. Let's just hypothetically say a few weeks later, you decide that you want to have a very special meal with somebody. I don't know, a son, a daughter, a significant other, a colleague, and you want to have the best possible service. Now, remembering, Debbie, kind of going back to our pyramid here for just a moment, remembering the experience you had before at that restaurant, what's your belief about the service at that restaurant?
Oh,
Debbie?
I'm gonna go there and have great service.
Yeah. So group, let's play this out. Debbie chooses to take this individual out back to this restaurant to go have great service. And as luck would have it, Debbie, you have the same exact server. Now, Debbie, you shared with the manager your expectation previously that you just want some alone time and I will signal to you when I want something.
Mm-hmm.
So you come in, the server is greeted, and she remembers, there's that woman who didn't like the service I provided before and will tell me when she wants me to come to her. So the server doesn't even come to your table. They don't bring a menu over. They are waiting for the signal based on their prior experience, the feedback that was shared to them. And then all of a sudden, Debbie, what starts to happen? What's your mindset right now? Because you're not seeing the server or anyone else approach your table.
Why are they ignoring me? What is going on?
Yeah, what's going on? And so, group, what you're starting to see here happen is this notion of experiences driving beliefs starts to also then influence the way people show up because of established or unestablished expectations. So let's play this out for just a minute. And Debbie, you know how this movie ends, right? You get annoyed, you call the manager over, right? The whole scene plays out again. And what was missed in both equations? We didn't establish that expectation up front in the first meeting, because it would have been a really easy conversation to have with the server to say, hey, you know what? Kind of a special meeting today, and I just want a few minutes. I'll signal to you when I want your help, right? Because I know you got great service in this restaurant. Is that okay? And the server would have probably looked at you and said, what, Debbie? Absolutely.
No problem.
Right? No problem. I'll just wait for the high sign. And then the very next time you come in and you sit down, you said to that server, hey, you know what? Today's one of those, I want the red carpet rolled out days, right? And she would have said, or he would have said, no problem, right? They would have been happy to know what was expected of them. So group, here's my question for you. When it comes to the expectations that you have for your teachers, your families, your students, how often do we have an expectation but have not established that expectation? How often do we have an expectation, but perhaps have not clearly established it because it's clear to us? All right. So Debbie, thank you so much. Thanks for your participation there. I love it. Thanks for making me not look foolish as well and playing out that game. So group, as we move forward here, there's a document that's been dropped into the Padlet. All right. It is a very simple assessment. All right. And this assessment, Jenny, good advice for happy marriages. Absolutely. How often do we have expectations for our significant others and don't establish those? Right? Absolutely. So when we talk about this idea of establishing an expectation versus having an expectation, here's what we know. Each of us as individuals, as leaders, we have a certain accountability style. How we establish those expectations, whether or not we establish them up front, whether or not we micromanage to those expectations. There's a natural style that all of us have from our experiences and the beliefs that we hold. So in the Padlet is this document, what we call an inspection styles self-assessment. And so group, I'm going to give you just a moment to take this assessment. And the way I want you to do this is if the statement below applies to you in any way, shape, or form, it sounds like you, someone would describe you this way, you think it describes you, just go ahead and, put a little check in the box or whatever. All right. If in fact, the statement does not describe you or doesn't fit who you are based on, the way you show up as an individual or a leader, just leave the box blank. When you're all done, you should have a certain number of check boxes on the left-hand side and a certain number of check boxes on the right-hand side. All you're going to do is add up the checks in the right-hand column and add up the checks in the left-hand column and put the total in the box there below. All right. So if there are any questions, please post them in the chat panel. All right. For those of you, the Padlet link, again, Juliet has been posting that there for us. There's that LB Inspection Styles PDF as well. So you can click on that and pull that down. I'll give you just a moment to kind of go through. Again, don't overthink this. If it describes you in any way, go ahead and check the box on it. If it doesn't, then just leave it blank and get your totals for both the right hand and left hand column. All right, right hand and left hand column. And if a few of you, as you finish out, would either give us a thumbs up or a something in either the chat panel or, some sort of a smiley face, some sort of an icon, something to alert us. Okay, Paloma, thank you. Danielle, thank you. Okay, I'll give it just about 15, 20 more seconds, group, on this. All right, done. Thank you, Madeira. Simon, thank you. Abby, awesome. Okay, very, very good. So as you're coming to a completion on this, once you have your totals in the box, simply transfer down to the bottom where you see those two boxes of coerce and compel and wait and see. Whatever box or column you have more in, you're going to just look at the descriptor down there at the bottom. Now, group, let me interpret this for you. The column at the bottom, or the descriptors at the bottom, coerce and compel and wait and see, are the far extremes, right? We're not at all suggesting to you, if you have a few more boxes in the left-hand side, you are a coerce compel person or a wait and see person. We're simply suggesting to you that based on this quick non-scientific assessment, you may have a particular tendency that is causing you to create some specific experiences for people. For example, if we have more checks in the left-hand box than the right-hand box, we may be a little bit more toward the coerce compel style. That would be in the extreme, a little bit more hands around the neck versus hands off style. The wait and see style, a little bit more of the hands off type of a style. Now, neither style is better than any one other style. The ideal, obviously, is that you would be able to gravitate as much toward the middle as possible. Okay, so Elizabeth, thanks. No worries on that. Hopefully, at least you got a sense of where your natural style would be, even if you couldn't necessarily check the boxes there, kind of which column was the best descriptor for you. Now, if you would just do me a favor, group, in the chat panel, I'm loving this, right? Okay, couldn't check either from the laptop. All right, so group, in the chat panel, just very, very high level, knowing it's column left, more coerce compel or more wait and see, which ones would best describe you? Which column best described you? Or if you could have checked the box, would have had the most checks in it, do you believe, for you? See a lot of wait and see coming up. Wait and see, wait and see, wait and see. Done, wait and see. Pretty even, 3 to 4. Okay, wait and see, wait and see. This is fascinating. Wait and see. Boy, we've got 78 people on here, and I've yet to see a coerce. Oh, there it is. All right. Is it Elke? I believe. I'm not sure I said that right. Okay, Elke, thank you. Elke, in just a moment, will you let us know if it's okay for me to pull you off a mute on this? That would be helpful. I don't want to surprise you here. And then Heather, you're a coerce compel as well. So, okay, Elke, perfect. So we're going to pull Elke off of mute here in just a moment, team, if we could.
She is.
So
Good to
group, what's so interesting on this is I want you to look at the large number of wait and sees. And Susan, maybe you were split right down the middle. Maybe you're a little bit of both. But what I will tell you on this is the natural style that we have will start to come through in the experiences we create for people. Now, Elke, let me come to you here. You were more coerce compel.
Yes.
Do you feel that's accurate, Elke, based on your natural personality style?
I feel like I definitely try to make relationships prior to implementing coercion. But I do like my data, and I do like things done the way, in an order. So I would say I probably lean naturally more to coerce compel.
Yeah, and by the way, Elke and team, again, it does not mean there's something wrong here. It is not some sort of statement of who you are as a person. None of that. It's just an awareness here that says if my natural tendency, Elke, is to coerce compel, what sort of beliefs would my team have about me, do you think, Elke, if they see me kind of constantly checking in on them to see if they're making progress?
They might worry that they are not being productive enough, or I have a negative opinion. So yeah, that's something that I definitely want to keep in check.
Yeah, and the same would hold true on the wait and see. And Elke, I'll be honest, I'm a wait and see person. Boy, I love that space. I'm super, super good at it. Yet when do I become a coerce compel person? When we get to the deadline and all of a sudden I don't have the results I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Now, start to think about this, team, relative to the relationships that you have right now and how this style may be influencing the beliefs that people hold about you. So you come to a general education classroom teacher, and your style then starts to inform them of how they need to interact with you. And if I'm interacting with Elke and it seems like she's going to give me a lot of data and other things, and I'm like, boy, I'm overwhelmed by the data, right? You just tell me how I can best do this, or, what's this now need to look like? Can you see where our style could potentially impede the progress that we're looking to make? Now, group, I'm gonna be the bearer of the obvious here. If 80 to 90% of our team showed up as wait and see, what sort of beliefs do you think administrators, faculty, other staff members could be holding about our friends here on this broader session that are looking to create greater inclusion? What sort of beliefs could people be holding if in fact they're the majority of this group that's on this call today, who are here making themselves better and developing themselves? What sort of beliefs do you think people could be holding if there's kind of a natural tendency for this team to show up as more of a wait and see style? Go ahead and put it in the chat panel. What sort of beliefs could people be holding if they see us as wait and see? Easy going. All right. They're too flexible. They're weak or pushovers. They're trustworthy. And Bridget, I love this. You hear the juxtaposition. One person defines it as trustworthy. Another person defines it as a pushover. Someone says not motivated. They're not getting things done. They can put off doing the work. that we don't care about them enough to check in. Do you see how, group, this perception of us or what we're trying to accomplish based on our style can actually potentially slow us down? Fear of sharing opinions, they're not leader material, it's a fixed mindset. Boy, there's some really, really powerful things here. If I'm too busy to do this, it's okay. My boss will just let it slide. Nadia, it's a really, really impactful kind of a statement and a belief there, because if a belief about any of us, me as a wait and see, is that, you know what, it's okay. I'm going to let it go. I will let it slide so they don't have to deliver on it. Do you see how this accountability style could be potentially slowing us down or getting in the way? Now, group, if you want to have a lot of fun with this, and please take it for what it's worth, go have someone close to you take this style assessment about you. Ask them to go through and take this assessment about you, right? Get that PDF or whatever, go give it to a significant other, a spouse, a neighbor, a friend, someone who you're close to, and say, hey, I'm curious on how you see me. And group, if they see you differently than perhaps you've seen yourself here, then that also is an opportunity for us to start to close some gaps on this, right? Louisa, great comments there. Super friendly on one side, not on top of it on the other. So some of you may remember back in the day when there used to be these things called newspapers, there was the Sunday comics. And one of my favorite Sunday comics in the newspaper was Dilbert. Now, some of you may remember the Dilbert cartoons, but Dilbert was always good about taking these topics of relationships, accountability, how do we create movement we're looking for, and kind of making light of it in a great way. And this is a Dilbert cartoon that I captured a while back. And he was talking to ASOC and he said, ASOC, I won't have time to hold your hand on this project. You need to work independently. And by that, I mean, you should imagine what I would tell you to do and then do it. Now, group, as we work our way through the rest of our time here today, I want you to really hold on to this idea of where is it that you have an expectation, but perhaps have not established that expectation. Now, there is one common theme that runs the world over as I work with leaders all over the world. And I ask them, why don't we effectively establish expectation? Why aren't we more deliberate in establishing expectations? Just in the chat panel, group, put your answer. Why aren't we more deliberate in establishing expectations, do you think? Vulnerability and trust. Yeah, that's a really great one. Assumptions. It makes us look bossy, afraid we'll be pushy. This is great from all you wait and see people who are saying, I don't want to be perceived as pushy, right? We don't want to be disappointed. If I establish it and people don't live up to it, then I'm going to be disappointed, afraid of hurting their feelings, right? We have to address any expectations that aren't commonly held. We feel that it's obvious. And again, group, I need you to be making some connections here today on this. Where is it right now that you have some expectations for people relative to your inclusion efforts that you believe are obvious, but may not be obvious to the people on the other side of it? All right. I love this. Danielle, I expect my colleagues to be professional without me needing to tell them how. Yeah, people get upset and complain when I'm pushy. Group, do you hear the beliefs? Michelle says, Michelle is interpreting this as me establishing expectations must mean that somehow I'm pushy. But group, here's what I would say to you. We all have expectations for other people. You have them in your professional life. You have them in your personal life. You all have them. We have them for our children, our neighbors, our colleagues. We all have them. The common reason why most people say they don't spend time establishing or being more deliberate in establishing an expectation is this. It takes time. I don't have time to go through and tell everyone, here's what I'm expecting, or here's, the expectation that I have. But let's build this out one step further, group. What are some things that we commonly do when an expectation is unmet? Again, just back in the chat panel, you've had an unmet expectation. What are some things that you naturally would show up then doing? You had an expectation for someone in the classroom, they didn't show up delivering on it. You had an expectation for a parent, they didn't show up delivering on it. Nadia, we expressed disappointment. We could be irritated. We could reprimand or redirect. We complain. Yeah, Christina, we maybe go below the line on that and complain to someone else, right? Sometimes we blame ourselves, right? It takes more time if the unmet expectation is unmet. Project misses, confusion. Terry, thank you, Terry. We finish it ourselves. Tina says the same thing. I end up doing it myself. In other words, it's not met, so I'll take it upon myself. And now, group, think about what happens. I have this unmet expectation. I take it upon myself, and so I do it. In our last session, we talked about my kids taking the trash cans out to the street, right? And if by chance they didn't get it done, then I run out there and I run those trash cans out to the curb on trash collection day. Well, group, think about this. What's the belief that my kids then start to hold if, in fact, when it's unmet, I do it for them? If their experience is, Dad's going to do it for me, what's the belief they start to hold? That, in fact, if I don't do it, it's fine. It's going to get taken care of. He'll always do it. And then now you're finding yourself in this leadership trap, group, as you're seeing it show up in the chat panel, right? That effectively we end up doing a lot of other people's work that they should be doing for themselves, right? Bridget, I love this. They start to think it's not important, etc. So, group, here's where I want to go with this. I want to give you a couple of tools right now so that no matter where your style is on this, you can begin to effectively make sure that you're kind of finding that middle ground and that you're establishing these expectations without being pushy or being perceived as bossy. But at the same time, you're also building this trust. All right. Yeah, Carrie, we're establishing unintended expectations often. Yeah. And group, again, please don't mistake this that you're doing anything wrong. This is just a reality of the fact that we all have different styles and we have these different experiences. So how do we engage people? And I saw this show up in the chat panel. I think it's Marilee. I hope I said that right, Marilee. Discuss the why. Marilee, are you okay to come off of mute for just a minute? And if so, just give me a thumbs up or whatever. I don't want to surprise you here. Marilee, a thumbs up or a yes or a something here, if that works for you. Marilee. All right. Not seeing it. So, all right. We'll hold off pulling you off a mute there, Marilee. If it works for you, great. But group, here's what we know when it comes to this idea of communicating expectations. Most of us as leaders communicate using a what and when style. Here's what I need you to do and by when. Here's what we need you as a parent to do, and here's the by when. Here's what we need from you as a student. Here's what we need from you as a classroom teacher. Here's what we need from you as an administrator, the what, and usually the when. And the converse is also true as people establish expectations for us.
Vince, Marilee is off mute.
I'm sorry?
Marilee is off mute.
Perfect. So Marilee, you talked about this idea of discussing the why. Tell me about your comment there. What was that in relationship to, Marilee? I want to make sure we're in the right spot here.
Well, just reflecting on different experiences, when an expectation isn't met that I am responsible for as a director, an administrator, then I just want to find out the why, not in a negative sense, but there could be barriers that's impeding the person from completion or not understanding exactly what the expectation is, or it could just be not blowing it off.
Yeah, completely. And so Marilee, what I love about this is you are getting at the crux of one of the biggest communication gaps that exist for any of us. When we are trying to get people to show up delivering on results and take accountability for what it is we need to deliver on, one of the biggest misses is the fact that we generally have the why conversation when things have gone wrong versus having the why conversation up front. And I'm not suggesting this is you, Marilee, but I'm just saying in general.
No, I agree with you on that. And that's why, to be honest with you, I always put, whenever there's, let's just say you're having a discussion with your team, the why is always present from the get-go.
Always present, right? And if it's not, there's a miss.
That's correct.
And if it's not, we're probably going to find ourselves merely on the back end going back and saying, well, why, why didn't you do this, et cetera, et cetera. So group, here's what we're suggesting. Marilee, thank you. That was super, super helpful. Great comments. Here's what we find, team. The conversation up front when we're communicating our expectations needs to be a why, what, when conversation, not just a what and a when. And I'll illustrate this with a very, very simple story. I was in an airport in Portland, Oregon, not too long ago, and the flight was about 2.5 hours late. And I was very frustrated. It has happened to be an airline issue. It had nothing to do with weather or anything else, but it was something going on with scheduling, et cetera, at the airlines. And I was really, really frustrated. About this point, the gate agent comes over and says, group, we need your help this evening. We would like you to bring any carry-on luggage you have up to the ticket counter and check it with us here with the gate agent. And you can pick it up at baggage claim in San Diego when you arrive there this evening. Now, group, I normally just travel with a carry-on. So the last thing I wanted to do was have to wait even more on the end of the trip for my baggage to show up on the baggage carousel. So I didn't move. I didn't even blink an eye. I didn't even look up. But because I do what I do every day, I thought, well, this is interesting. Here is someone who has a desire for us to do something, but quite frankly, no positional authority. No ability to tell us we absolutely have to do it, right? So here she comes over the loudspeaker and she asks for us to check our baggage and pick it up when we arrive at baggage claim in San Diego. And quite honestly, group, no one moved. I didn't see anybody even look up from their phone as the announcement was being made. No one moved. And ultimately, she had 0 bags that had been brought up to the counter. A few minutes later, she comes on again and she says this: if you will bring your bags up here and check them with me and be willing to pick them up at baggage claim, I will allow you to board right after the first class passengers. You can be put in that group 1 and board right after the first class passengers. So in other words, I will give you something if you do what I'm asking you to do. Now, how often do we try to entice people with some sort of incentive, right? So she's dangling the incentive carrot out here, expecting that somehow we're now going to show up and follow through on what she needs us to do. Well, group, again, I didn't give up my bag. I'll be honest with you. I wasn't about to give up my bag, but I watched 3 people bring their bag up to her. Could you see where this gate agent could have then thought, you know what, I've done my job, but here's where the story gets really interesting. And Marilee, it ties us back to exactly what you're saying. The why was obvious. She thought it was very clear to all of us why we needed to take our bags up there. The flight was late, et cetera. It seemed obvious to her because she does this every day. But here's where the story get really good. She comes over the loudspeaker as people are exiting the plane from the prior flight. And she said, group, as you can see, the flight has arrived. We need to get everyone off of this plane and you on this plane and away from the gate in the next 25 minutes. If we do not do that, our flight crew will officially time out. And if you don't know what that means they have reached the end of their working day and they will have to be replaced because by regulation, they can no longer fly. You can expect if our flight crew times out that you will be here between an hour and a half to 3 hours longer while we find a replacement crew and get them over here, et cetera, and get the plane back into the queue to take off. One of the ways you can help us is you can bring your bags up here and check them with us here at the gate. Now, group, I've never seen people move so fast. There's people, including myself, me and 137 people, there's bags stacked everywhere, all over the place. Now, I've told this story multiple times to people and they say, well, she threatened you. Well, group, was she actually threatening us at this point? She gave us a choice. We did not have to give up our bag. But ultimately, what she did was she provided a compelling why. And in doing so, she answered some questions that everyone on this plane was running through their head. Now, as a frequent flyer, my why was different than the casual flyer who only flies 1 or 2 times a year. Mine was, you know what? I'm not going to give up my bag. I've done this hundreds of times, and it's going to take 25 minutes at San Diego before I ever see my luggage. So it doesn't work for me. So you'll see these 5 why questions that in some form or another, every one of us needs to have answered before we choose to engage in any expectation that someone has. If you think about it, someone comes to you and I come to Kevin and I say, Kevin, hey, I need you to do this. The first thing that's going to be running through Kevin's head is, okay, but why? Why me? Or why now? Now think about how this plays out, group. How often have you gone back to an administrator, a parent, a student, and you said, hey, I need you to do this. And it was the same thing they were supposed to do a week ago, but it never got done there. Or it's the same thing we talked about last year and it didn't get delivered on, but now you're coming back to them and asking them to deliver on it. Could you see where they could have some version of a why now question that needs to be answered? Or why are you asking me to do it? Or why do you want me to do it this way? Because I think there's 10 other ways we can do it. So when we can answer these questions, we start to engage people in a deeper dialogue. All right. And that dialogue then allows us to make sure that we are aligned in our expectations. Because if I go to Kevin and say, hey, Kevin, here's where I need you to do this, and here's why I need you to do this now, this week. And Kevin comes back to me and says, yeah, but honestly, I've got all these other things going on. Is this something that can be pushed back till next week? Do you see how that dialogue now allows us to align expectations? And here comes the other aha moment for us, group. If I go to my team and say, here's what I need you to deliver on, what questions do you have? What am I likely to hear? If I say, hey, what questions do you have on this? Right? Maybe I put up a PowerPoint and say, here's the 10 things I need. Or I send an email out to somebody and say, if you have any questions, send them to me. What usually happens in that instance, group? Think about it. Throw it in the chat panel. No questions, Nadia says. Yeah, radio silence. Kind of like my question I just asked you right there. A bit of radio silence, right? No questions. Now, group, does that mean your team has no questions? Just because you didn't get them, does that mean they have no questions? Of course not. They all have questions. We all have questions for anything we're asked to do. It could simply be, I was reminded of this earlier today. As I came home from a client engagement, I walked in the door and I heard my wife asking one of my daughters to put some dishes in the dishwasher. And instantly her response was, well, why do I have to do this and not Mallory, her sister? Why do I have to do this and not her? Do you hear the why question, group? And the easy answer for my wife, who, by the way, on her assessment would go more toward coerce, compel, was because I told you so. Now, if you want to talk about how to make sure someone is not engaged, the because I told you so answer usually is not the best way to engage someone in what it is you're trying to accomplish. So here's our suggestion for you, group. We found that instead of asking this, what questions do you have? Or are there any questions? A much more powerful way to make sure we're aligned on the expectations we're needing to achieve is to have what we call an alignment dialogue. And that dialogue you're seeing here on the screen. It's a simple 3-step process where instead of asking what questions do you have, you ask people to rank or rate their commitment to delivering on what is expected of them. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being you're all in, you're going to deliver on this, you're going to overcome whatever obstacles come your way. 1 being completely out, where are you at on this? 1 to 10. And then I could go to Dawn and I could say, so Dawn, 1 to 10, where are you at? Now, if Dawn says to me, I'm a 10, right? Does that mean Dawn doesn't have any questions? Probably not, right, Dawn? It probably means you don't have any questions, right? You probably still have some questions. Is that fair?
I always have questions.
Always have questions. Yet, think about this. From an experience creation standpoint, sometimes as a leader, we say, what questions do you have? And we hear nothing. And we assume that that means people don't have questions. So Dawn, thank you for setting us straight. Some people always have questions. So 1 to 10, where are you at? So Dawn, I'll come to you again here. If I came to you and said 1 to 10, what questions do you have? How aligned are you on a scale of 1 to 10 with getting this done by the end of the week? Let's just say that's the expectation. Your answer to something like that would be what, Dawn? If I ask you 1 to 10 on something random like that, what do you think?
I would probably first say, clarify what you mean by end of the week. I need specifics, or I
group,
get
this is so good because Dawn is teaching us a powerful thing here, group. Even though it's super clear to me what I mean by end of the week, do you see here that was a version of me having an expectation, but not establishing it? Does that mean Friday at 5 o'clock? Does that mean Sunday? Because we're operating on a Sunday to Sunday calendar. Do you see where that clarity, when do we usually get that question though, team? When does that question usually get asked? When the expectation has gone unmet and we've gone to them, as Marilee said, and said, what's going on? Well, I thought you meant it was Sunday. I thought that was the end of the week, or Tuesday, or whatever it was that they come up with. Now, group, if we can have this alignment dialogue and Dawn says, well, hey, I think I'm a 6 or a 7 because I'm not sure what you even mean by the end of the week. Then it gets us to the second point. Well, Dawn, you know, is that going to make you closer to a 10 if I told you it's Friday at 5 o'clock? Would your level of commitment to deliver on that be higher or lower then, Dawn? Do you see how, group, we're now having a dialogue? What's the value of an alignment dialogue? Dawn, what do you think? What's the value of us having a dialogue here around this idea of alignment?
Well, I think then the expectations become very clear for all the parties involved, and it's more likely to be completed when it's expected and how it's expected.
Yeah, and if we're not having this conversation up front, group, when do we usually have it? When things have gone off track. So I promise you, team, the simple process of, first of all, ensuring the fact that you are communicating the why, what, and when You don't have to communicate all the whys. Not everybody needs all the whys answered. But also then when it comes to this idea of establishing expectations, ensuring the fact that instead of saying, what questions do you have, you begin to simply change your question here on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being all in, 1 being all out. Where are you at right now? Now, team, some of you may be thinking to yourself, well, somebody's just going to say 10 to me anyway. They're afraid to ask a question. Well, please, this is one of those how did that happen moments. This is that opportunity to kind of look in the mirror a little bit and go, if my team's going to tell me a 10, but they're actually at a 7, what experience do I need to create for them so they're willing to show up the right way? This may be as simple as me going to Kristen ahead of the meeting and saying, Kristen, today in the meeting, I'm going to ask you 1 to 10. Are you aligned? 10 all in, 1 I'm all out. No matter where you're at, Kristen, on this scale, will you just say 7 and then ask a question behind it? And Kristen's going to look at me and go, oh, okay. You asked me to, so I will. So then I go through and I say, oh, Kevin, where are we at? 10. Heather, where are we at? 10. Debbie, where are we at? 10. All right. Bridget, where are we at? 10. Perfect. Kristen, where are you at? Well, 7. And the reason I'm at a 7 is I'm not sure what you mean by the end of the week. Now, the minute Kristen does that, team, I promise you everyone else on the team or in the room is going to say, well, now that Kristen says it, I did have that same question and I also have this one. And now you can open up the dialogue so that you can have a better opportunity to align to the expectations up front instead of doing it after the fact when those expectations have gone unmet. So team, we are getting very close to the end of our time here. All right. So I do want to leave a few minutes for questions here. For our SIP team, are we seeing any questions in the Q&A? Or team, please pose your questions now in the Q&A area or the chat panel. We want to make sure we spare a few minutes here to get those answered as we finish out here today.
It doesn't look like we have questions in the Q&A, but I just want to let you know that I'm going to perseverate now for the next, 24 hours until your next presentation on having expectations. And like that whole idea of, are we putting expectations out there that we're not defining? Like, I have to reflect on my own leadership and whether or not that's an area that I need to work on.
Group, we all have these moments. It seems super. I've been married for 30 years, and there are some things that I just believe that my wife understands. That she should get it by now, it seems like. The reality is, oftentimes I find myself having to go back after the fact when things have gone wrong or have been unmet and say, but wait, this is the why I was asking you to do this right now, is because I had 11 meetings today all in a row and I wasn't going to have time to call my mom or dad, right? And check in on them or whatever it is. There's always something there. So our opportunity to think about this group, it's a very real gap that tends to creep into our own leadership. And so, Kevin, I appreciate that. Jenny, your comment here, I even have to think about the expectations I hold that I'm not aware of that cause people to disappoint me. Boy, that's a really, Jenny, that is a beautiful, how did I let that happen kind of a moment versus after the fact looking at it and saying, well, how did that happen? How can I be disappointed in this? I cannot believe they didn't show up doing this, versus saying, how do I then make sure that my expectations are aligned to what they're even capable to deliver? And when you think about your teachers, your administrators, your faculty, your people closest to you, your families, this is real for all of us, group. And yeah, Kristen, I love that. Sparked an added point to the alignment dialogue. Is it reasonable? Yeah, and if we go back to those 5 why questions, you may even look at one of those 5 whys is this obtainable, right? Why me? And why are you asking to this level? Because it may be that I could do this, but I can't do it in the time frame you've outlined. Right. So it's an important distinction here.
And really
Right.
asking ourselves, Vince, as leaders, have we created the structures and the support system for those expectations to be met?
Yeah.
That's a hard one.
And Kevin, it is hard in group. I hope I've challenged you a little bit on your mindset. We've been talking a lot from the initial SIP conference around this idea of mindset and experiences driving beliefs and, all of this stuff with a pyramid and above the line and below the line. But one of the ways we go below the line as individuals is we've had these expectations and then somebody doesn't show up delivering in the way we think they should. And then naturally we go to this idea of finger pointing, blame, etc. Because we've just not established the expectation. Again, team, we're not suggesting we're broken. We're giving you tools in your toolbox so that you can be a much more effective leader in how you hold people accountable for the things that matter most for you, personally or otherwise. So with that, we're at time, Kevin. So
once again, thank you so much for amazing information. And we hope everyone joins us tomorrow, same time, for the final session in the 4-part series, Best Practices in Achieving Desired Results. Can't wait.
Thank you all. Great job today. It's a pleasure to be with you. We'll see you all tomorrow. Looking forward to it.
Thank you, Vince.
Thanks, Vince. We'll see you tomorrow.
That work for you guys today?
Awesome.
Yes, great.
All right. Anything you want to make sure we button up with the group tomorrow?
You know what would be great is if, sorry, I should use my video. I was just kind of thinking this as you were talking about those connections, is maybe even just a summary for folks who didn't get to watch all 4. So it's to show those connections, like the first session, we talked about this, 3 takeaways, the second one, this 3 takeaways. So they kind of have this little cheat sheet to bring it all together.
Almost the Reader's Digest version of
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And not like, I'm not trying to create like a bunch more work, for you, but even just like a slide that points out
Totally. Yeah.
little things.
Yeah. Key takeaways, kind of a slide.
Yeah.
Here's what we've progressed to.
Remind them of their new learning.
I can do that. So tomorrow is the session, and you guys are going to laugh at this. So tomorrow is the session where I'm going to literally be joining you probably from the Delta Crown Room in the Minneapolis airport, because I've planned my layover to deliver this session because I have to be in Philadelphia for Wednesday morning. Yeah. And so the only way I could get in this last session was for me, literally, I've got like a 4-hour layover on the ground, an hour and a half before in case the flight is delayed, et cetera, those sorts of things, to make sure I show up delivering on this for you.
Well, thank you.
We
know the airport pain. It's totally fine.
And we may even, Kevin, want to interpret as we start tomorrow to just let people know that it's not that I'm shortchanging anyone. It's not that it's not important. It's just a reality of
absolutely
the way my life works.
We're used to the airport, the car, like wherever we happen to be, we just go with it.
Yeah. And so again, I've got a block of time that's set aside. I don't know exactly where. I think I have an idea because I've been to Minneapolis a bunch of times, where we'll pull off this session for you. But looking forward to tomorrow.
Great.
Kristen, great suggestion. I will build some summary slides for us and make sure that we've got that rolled up for the team, so we can put all the pieces together. Okay.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Great.
Thanks so much.
Good job, you guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Vince.
Good to see y'all. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.